guys, it's Will, it's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the laundry room. If you're new here and you feel like subscribing, that would be a huge help. Thank you so much. I say it every time. I'm sorry if you're sick of hearing me say it, but it really does help, I promise you. So what are we here to talk about today? Blu-ray review o'clock. Hell to the yes. Hell to the yes. So this is a double feature Wing Chun themed Sammo Hung martial arts extravaganza from Eureka Entertainment. This is a Region Blue release. This came out in January of 2022, but mine got lost in the mail. If you're in my Facebook group, you probably saw me explain why it's taken me so long to get around to reviewing this, because a lot of people were asking me to review it and wondering why I was reviewing their February release before their January release, they being Eureka, of course. And the reason is that it just got lost in the mail. I don't know exactly what happened. Eureka actually emailed me about it, and I had a little exchange with them. They were very nice about it. I apologized for it and everything. But there were some COVID restrictions in the UK, I think over Christmas time and New Year's, like holiday. And then increased COVID restrictions in the US, or at least in California, because of the Omicron surge and all that stuff. So it may have had something to do with that. I don't honestly know. But anyway, suffice it to say, I now have it in my hand. This is a double feature, and both films on here have significant bonus material, so I am reviewing these separately. I just thought that would make more sense rather than doing like a 40-minute long video. I'll do two 20-minute long videos. Yay! So just to show off the release here, this is the slipcase, which is as always with Eureka, limited. I think it's either the first 2,000 or 3,000. I apologize for not knowing the number right off the top of my head. But so this is the information here for Warriors 2. This is the information for Prodigal Son, which is the other film on here. You can see both the titles there. And then the slipcase comes off, and this actually comes with a poster. And I was gonna for some reason when I get excited in videos, my default thing is to sing the theme from the Christopher Reeve Superman movie, and I don't know why, but I always do it. So here's the this is the Warriors 2 side of the poster, and then you flip it over, and this is the Prodigal Son side. Yeah, so there you go. You get a lot of bang for your buck there. And these are Golden Harvest films. If you saw the Golden Harvest logo there. And then here you have the obviously the two posters for the films, and in the back it's kind of similar to what they did with the Joseph Coe set, with the posters and in terms of the double features that are presented on that set as well, because that set is set up all as double features. So this is the Warriors 2 disc here. And then you can see this is the booklet. And then other disc there, and you can, if you want, reverse the and there's like basically, I'm trying to just avoid glare here. I know there's like a lot of weird angles going on with my face and with that, but there's a lot of glare in the laundry room, and I apologize. So you can reverse that, and you can get just the individual artwork for the films if you want, instead of like the double poster hit there. And then for the booklet, and then there's some images on the back here as well, color-coded to the film. And so the essay here is by James Oliver, who has written a lot of these essays before, and I've reviewed his work quite a bit in the past. And this is a good essay, and it does a couple things. It kind of contextualizes the film a little bit in Sammo's career. It discusses the fact that a lot of people believe this is Sammo Hung's first masterpiece, analyzes the film a little bit and what Sammo does really well. And one of the points that I thought was very interesting in this essay that James Oliver points out is that in this film, and I'll talk more about this later, but the film is kind of about Wing Chun, right, which is a form of martial arts. And despite the fact that Sammo Hung is trying very hard to be authentic in the representation of Wing Chun, he is first and foremost an entertainer, and comes from the background of Peking opera, storytelling, theatricality, and that kind of stuff. And you can really see that he's willing to do whatever is needed to be done in order to kind of tell the story as he believes it needs to be told, to make the most entertaining and compelling story that will make the best film and also resonate best with the audience. And kind of related to that note, I've been watching a lot of Sammo movies recently, and both Sammo as an actor and Sammo as a director, and something I've noticed is that Sammo seems to have like a really, really intuitive understanding. And I don't know if this is something that he learned through Peking opera or what have you, but he just seems to have this very natural understanding of the fact that what audiences really, really care about is the relationships between characters. Sammo does a good job of creating individual characters that are unique and really interesting, but what I think he does really, really well is create unique and memorable relationships between characters that make you want to return to his films because you love those relationships. And when you look at things that endure for decades, I mean, I'm thinking of television right off the top of my head, even though I know I'm talking about movies, but like an example that comes up a lot when I talk to, people who work in the film industry, who are friends of mine and stuff like that, Friends and The Office always get mentioned. Those shows are really about, like, they have outlandish characters. You have Dwight, Michael, and, whatever, on The Office. And I'm not as familiar with The Office, to be honest with you. So Jim Krasinski, I don't know. Is his character's name Jim? Is it? This is embarrassing. Pam, that's her name. Pam, Toby. I have watched The Office, but it's not like one of those shows I watch over and over again. But even though there are very strong individual characters on that show and on Friends, what those shows are really about is relationships. And the analytics show that those shows get watched over and over and over. Like at one point, one of my friends who works in streaming told me that The Office accounted for something like 7 to 10% of everything watched on Netflix when they had The Office. Like, people just come back to it, and it's because of relationships. And Sammo, I think, really excels at that, and you really see that here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what this movie is about, tell you who's in it, stuff like that. And then I'm going to give you my impressions of the film. I don't think I've seen this movie before. I'll talk more about that in a second. And then I'm going to review the Blu-ray. So this film came out in 1978. It is directed by Sammo Hung. It's written by Sammo Hung. It stars Sammo Hung. It stars Casanova Wong. Casanova Wong is Korean. And he, as I learned from the bonus material here, he had just come out of the Marines. He was in the Marines in South Korea. He had just come out of the Marines when he was cast in this film. So he was like at the peak of his physical shape and his martial arts. In this movie, it's just bananas. Like, there's a scene where he does like a flying, twisting 360 kick leap over a table and hammers this guy in the head. Like, it's banana. Like, his physical ability is bananas. A lot of the people who you'll recognize from Sammo's later films are in this movie, like in bit parts. Like Yoon Byung, I think, plays 3 different characters. Like, he plays at least 2 characters, but I think I counted 3 that he's playing like in the background. Lam Ching-ying is in this film. And obviously, he's very recognizable. Mars is in this film. Fung Hak-on, who plays the villain, who you'll definitely recognize. Eric Sang, I think, is in this film. Mang Hoi. So Mang Hoi kind of looks like Yoon Byung. He's in Heart of Dragon and like a bunch of those other like 80s Sammo movies. Like I think he's in the Lucky Stars movies and stuff like that. And I always recognize him because I'm like, oh, there's the guy who looks like Yoon Byung a little bit. But then Brian Beardy Lung, right, is in this film. Beardy is like his nickname, and he plays like one of the leads. And I'm just looking at my notes here because I don't want to forget anyone. Lau Kar-wing is in this film. As like I said, it's a Golden Harvest film, and so in the film, Casanova Wong is playing, the character he plays was the real-life Sifu of Ip Man. So he was like a real-life practitioner of Wing Chun. And this film is deeply rooted in Wing Chun philosophy and like the Wing Chun, like the moves of it and the history of it. That's the word I'm looking for, the history of Wing Chun. And it actually opens with a monologue over people doing Wing Chun of kind of the history of Wing Chun and a little bit about the philosophy of it. And so it really goes deep into that. And this is very much like a martial arts film of its era, 1978. Like, it's very much in keeping with like the Shaw films of that era. And it'll feel very familiar, not in a bad way, but I think in a good way if you're a big fan of those films, because it's like coming home to something, right? Because it's like, it's got those familiar touchstones, but it's got Sammo Hung, and so he elevates it. And it's really, really cool to see that. I'm just going in looking at my notes here, so I don't want to forget anything before I kind of get into my notes. But the basic plot here is relatively simple. There's a bad guy who was into like shady stuff and all this criminality and things like that, and he came to a new town and he started a bank with all the money from all the bad stuff he did, right? But no one knows that he was doing all this bad stuff. They just see him as this respectable banker, and his plan is, you know, his like old goons basically come and find him, like the gang that he was with, right? Because he kind of took off and started this bank, and they come and find him, and they're like, you know, what happened to the money? Like, are we still cool? Like, are we still hanging out? Whatever. And he's like, oh, don't worry, I got a plan. I'm gonna kill the mayor. I'm gonna take over this whole damn city, right? So they're like, okay, cool, that sounds fun. And Casanova Wong's character overhears their plan, and it sets off this series of events, and he's friends with the Sammo Hung character. Sammo Hung kind of plays like this kind of classic Sammo thing where he's like sort of the comedic relief. He's sort of like the everyman who's like the stand-in for the average person on the street who's not like a superhero, but also he's Sammo Hung, so he is kind of a superhero. So he's like, you know, Sammo wears a lot of hats in movies like this, and it's always really fun to see him like kind of shifting between these personas, but he plays like kind of a classic Sammo character, right? And then Sammo is, he's like very kind of rudimentary at Wing Chun. He's trying to learn it, and he has a Sifu, and he introduces the Casanova Wong character to his Sifu, and then they start doing Wing Chun together, and then all kind of ass whooping ensues. So, to give you, so like I said, I'm not sure if I've seen this movie before. I know that sounds absurd. I kind of don't think I have. I thought I had. And then I watched it, and it didn't really spark anything. Like, no memories, like, oh, I recognize this scene. Like, the Dean Sheck character is the only thing where I was like, I feel like I've seen this before. But I feel like Dean Sheck has played that character in other movies, so I might be thinking of another movie. Dean Sheck plays this kind of, like, creepy guy with a long mustache. He's kind of, like, hunched over, and, like, he has all these kind of nefarious plans. But I feel like he's played that character before or elsewhere, and so I think that's maybe what I recognize this movie from. So I kind of don't think I've seen this film before. I loved this movie. You probably expected me to say that. I say that a lot about movies on this channel. So will you like this movie, I think, is really the question that you need answered rather than did I like this movie. If you are not a fan of old school martial arts films, and you very much know that you are not a fan of old school martial arts films, and you just don't like the Shaw films and other kind of like older like Golden Harvest movies and stuff like that, I really don't think this movie will change your mind. Because basically this movie is a superlative example of your classic film from that period. It does not break the mold. It stays exactly in the lane of those films, with like the revenge plot and like the you know, these very evil bad guys, and it's very violent and bloody. What it does is it has Sammo Hung really hitting his stride as a filmmaker, and so it has that kind of classic Sammo personality to it, and it takes the fighting to the next level. The fights in this movie are insane, especially like the last 30, 40 minutes, and it's very innovative. There's one scene where these two guys are fighting in a bamboo forest, and it's dark, and there's all these, I think, cicadas or something, so there's lots of noise, and so their senses are getting obscured. They can't hear well, they can't see well, and they're trying to fight, and they can't really see each other, and it's really, really interesting. And there's a lot of scenes in this film where they take what would be kind of an ordinary trope in the hands of maybe a lesser director or in a different film, and it becomes really unique and interesting. The weapons fighting in this movie is also really fantastic. There's like sword fighting, spear fighting. The training sequences are really, really awesome. Obviously, in all these classic films, you have training sequences. Really, really, I found the training sequences to be really engrossing. The dive into kind of the philosophy and the practice of Wing Chun I thought was really interesting. I have had actual practitioners of Wing Chun who are in my Facebook group tell me that there's not really kicking in Wing Chun, which I like kind of knew. I've taken a little bit of JKD, which is Jeet Kune Do, which is Bruce Lee's specific, like the martial arts system that he developed. But, you know, he had studied Wing Chun, so there's a lot of Wing Chun in it. So I have learned like the basic Wing Chun hand movements and stuff like that. But I'm not a practitioner of Wing Chun. I don't consider myself to be an expert on any of that stuff. So people who do practice Wing Chun have said that it's not wholly authentic because there's a ton of kicking in it, and kicking is not a thing in Wing Chun. And there's a lot of kicking in this movie, and the kicking is awesome. And there's like just like innovative use of like, and I don't want to give, this is like a very, very tiny spoiler. There's a bear trap in this movie that is in a fight scene. Whew, mama. Yeah, it gets bloody. And so this is just like, to me, this is a superlative example of a not super, but like pretty bloody, brutal, but also slightly comedic with the way that we can only say that about Hong Kong films, right? Because you were to say like about a Hollywood movie, oh yeah, well, it's really savage and almost everyone dies, but ooh, it's a knee slapper. We don't make those movies here, but it works in Hong Kong and it makes sense. You'll know what I'm talking about if you know what I'm talking about. And so, yeah, I mean, I really think that if you do love these movies, you'll love it. If you don't know whether you love these films, if you're new to the genre, if you're, you know John Woo or whatever, you like the gunplay films, but if you don't really know if old school martial arts is your thing, I think this is a good movie to check out for a couple reasons. One, Sammo Hung is a huge figure in Hong Kong cinema in general, in multiple genres for multiple decades. And this is a film, like I said, that a lot of people do think is his first masterpiece. So it's worth checking out. And you get, I mean, if you buy this, you get 2 movies. And Prodigal Son really is, I think, undisputably to most people, a Sammo Hung masterpiece. But it's definitely a good movie to check out. Also, amazing fight scenes and interesting filmmaking techniques, too. Like, Bobby Samuels, and I'll talk about his commentary track later more, but he has said that Sammo loves watching Western films and watches tons of them, and then will often include references to Western films in his own movies. And you can see how someone who had been watching American films in the 70s would make a movie like this, because there's like handheld camera and there's tracking shot. There's a lot of interesting filmmaking techniques, editing, a very sharp, crisp editing in ways that tell stories through the fight scenes that is not the kind of thing that you might traditionally see in like a Shaw Brothers film. And also, this film took a long time to make. It took over a year to make. So a lot of effort was put into it in a way that I think those Shaw films were made very, very quickly, right? And you can see how someone who had been, obviously, American films in the 70s, you're talking about Spielberg, you're talking about Scorsese, you're talking about Coppola, and stuff like that, right? You could see how like that emphasis on really clean, precise filmmaking technique would have influenced a film like this. So that's kind of my 2 cents on the movie, and I'm going to review. I'm just looking at my notes to make sure there's not anything like really obvious that I left out. But like I said, if you love these movies, you'll love this movie. If you're not sure if you love these movies, I think this would be a good one to check out. I will say there's one caveat. The first 5 to 10 minutes, it seems like a different movie that it's going to be, because it opens up with this, like I said, this voiceover about the history of Wing Chun. And then it goes into this very silly comedic scene. And there's a lot of, like, it's like oil and water. But it settles into a rhythm after those first couple scenes, and it moves like gangbusters. The plot moves really quickly. The fight scenes are awesome. So just, if you're on the fence about it and you were watching the first 5-6 minutes, you're like, promise or trust me, get through that and then see how you feel about the next 10 to 20 minutes, because that really tells you what kind of movie this is. So to review the Blu-ray, there's really 2 major features on here. And I should also say there's 2 cuts of the film. There's the Hong Kong cut and then the international export version. And there's the original Cantonese audio, and there's an English dub. There's new subtitles for this release. And it looks absolutely freaking fantastic. Other people who have done videos already on this release, because like I said, I got mine late. A lot of people have already reviewed this, have talked about how excellent the image quality here is, especially compared to older releases. And so, yeah, fantastic work from Eureka. The 2 bonus features. There is a 47-minute long making of. I'm not shitting you that it is 47 minutes long. It has interviews with Sammo. It has interviews with Beardy, the guy who's in the film, like I said. The guy who plays the villain has a name that I just, even though I recognize him, Fung Hak On, very hard for me to remember for whatever reason. And Guy Lai, who is the fight, he was like their Wing Chun guy, basically. So he was a fight like choreographer, director, stuff like that in Hong Kong at the time. He was friends with Sammo Hung. And he was a practitioner of Wing Chun, so Sammo hired him specifically to work on this film. And it's also worth noting that according to all the material here, like the essay, the commentary track, and the making of, that this is really the first major Wing Chun film. So if you're a big fan of Ip Man and stuff like that, and you want to know about the history of Wing Chun as represented in cinema, then I would highly recommend checking this film out, because as I've learned, this really is like the first marquee Wing Chun film. And so apparently previous to this film coming out, this is something that James Oliver writes about in his essay, people had thought of Wing Chun as not really cinematic because it's all in the hands mostly, and it's about straight lines, and it's not like over-the-top acrobatic flying kicks, big movements. Like, it's very economical, tight, controlled, centered, like that kind of stuff, right? But Sammo, I guess, was looking for a unique style of fighting and a unique history of a school of martial arts to tell with this film. And so he went to Guy Lai, who was like a Wing Chun guy. I was like, what do you think? Like, can we do this movie? Can you show me some Wing Chun and stuff like that? And so that's the movie kind of started unfolding from those conversations he was having with him. So Guy Lai is really, like, he explains the whole philosophy of Wing Chun, the way the hand movements work, what the objective is, how it places emphasis on sensory reactions rather than like conscious mental attempts to do moves, if that makes sense. And it's really interesting. Like I said, it took over a year to make this film, and everyone talks about how Sammo was really demanded a lot of people. And so I think it's Casanova Wong who said, like, if you were giving 90% to Sammo, he would want 120%. But no one says anything bad about Sammo. It's really interesting. Like, everyone says he really demanded a lot, but then they say, like, we really respected him. He got the best out of us. Like, Casanova Wong, I think, said this is the best movie I ever made. And Casanova Wong and a lot of the other actors talk about how, like, Sammo was teaching them filmmaking techniques on the set and giving them advice on filmmaking and, like, how to get into different areas of filmmaking and to diversify outside of, like, stunt work, acting, stuff like that. Like, seems like someone who was really invested in helping everyone succeed and like to grow the industry and stuff like that, and was really gregarious and just loved interacting with everybody and being a part of the filmmaking community and stuff like that. So it's really cool that, and Sammo's interviewed in there too, and he's got a lot of really interesting stuff to say about his interest in Wing Chun and why he wanted to make this film, what he was going for. The film was shot in South Korea and at the Golden Harvest Studios, so they talk about that. And like, Beardy talks about how, there's like a training sequence with the wooden dummies, and he's like, that took like 10 days to shoot, and it was in July, and it was in a really stuffy studio, and I was like sweating balls, and his arms were like all swollen from hitting the wooden dummy for like 10 hours a day. And just like really great stories about like kind of like the nuts and bolts of filmmaking and what it's like to be on the sets of these films, making these films, and just it paints such a great portrait of just the process of creating these films that we love so much. So I thought that was an amazing bonus feature and really super cool. Now, Bobby Samuels and Frank Zhang, their rapport is incredible. I actually went in my Facebook group while I was watching this commentary track and was like, and I posted, like, these guys need a podcast. Like, their rapport is so natural, and they're like, Frank knows so much. His knowledge of the language, of the culture, of the history of the films, and he adds so much value to the watch. Of like, he tells you what the Chinese title is and what it means, and he talks about some of the puns that are in Cantonese, and Bobby speaks Cantonese too. Now, I said I was going to do my Cantonese as I learned more as I went along. I have 3 more things that I can say. I didn't practice at all before making this video, even though I've been practicing, like day to day a little bit. So it might be, this might sound horrible, but I did say I was going to keep everyone apprised of my progress. So I learned hello, which is neho, I believe, neho. I learned, so this next one is, my pronunciation of it is horrible. I think it means please in a formal context. That's what the app said that I'm using. So saying, my problem with this one is I can't hear what the sound at the beginning of the word is. I can't tell if it's like a TS type sound like you would have in Japanese. I can't tell if it's just an S. I can't tell if it's just a T. It's spelled C-E-N-G. But when I listen to the voice of the person on the app saying it, I can't tell what she's saying. So it's like, I know my pronunciation is horrible. Saying. That's what it sounds like she's saying to me. Saying. But I just get, it's terrible and I apologize. Now, I also learned what I think means excuse me, which is umhoisi, kind of like that, umhoisi. I think that means excuse me. So if you speak Cantonese, please tell me if I'm correct, if that's what those words mean. And I apologize. My pronunciation is probably horrible. I'm not learning grammar. I'm just learning words right now. It's been really fun, honestly. And I like sharing this with you. It's 25 minutes in the video, so probably literally no one is still watching. I'm just speaking Cantonese to my laundry room. Yeah. Anyway, so the reason I started learning Cantonese is that Bobby Samuels speaks Cantonese and he taught himself Cantonese, and I was so impressed with him speaking Cantonese on the Skinny Tiger and Fatty Dragon commentary track with Frank that I was like, I gotta try to learn just a little bit. This commentary track is just amazing. Like Bobby Samuels talks about how when he lived with Sammo Hung, if you didn't know that. He's from Philadelphia, and I think he lived in New York a bit too. He talks about how his dad was living in New York for a while in this commentary track. So he I think primarily grew up in Philly, but also was living in New York a bit as well. He lived with Sammo, and he talks about how Lau Kar-wing would come over like every day. And Lau Kar-wing is in this film. Lau Kar-wing is the brother of Lau Kar-leung, and Lau Kar-wing was the director of Skinny Tiger and Fatty Dragon. And so he and Sammo were like really, really close. And so that's really interesting to hear. And they would just like hang out and talk all day and stuff like that. And he taught his own story is just so interesting. Like he saw King Boxer when he was young, and he's just like, that's what I want to do. I want to be in those movies. I want to do Shaw Brothers, like that kind of stuff. And he worked at like the Chinese language movie theater in Philadelphia. He would like sweep up the floors and stuff like that. And like when he would go to New York, he would go to Times Square and see all the films. And he and Frank just like, they talk about like, oh, have you ever been to that restaurant in Hong Kong? Oh yeah, I know that place really well. Well, one time I went there and they showed me where Lau Kar-wing's table was. And like that kind of stuff is just so cool and so interesting to hear. And Bobby Samuels talks about how he first met Sammo, and then Sammo put him in a movie. And if you don't know, he is the first and only African-American member of the Hong Kong Stuntman's Union. So that's like kind of mind-blowing and amazing. And I'm just looking at my notes here to see if there's anything else. I don't want to tell you like every single thing that they talk about on this and all of their stories. But he tells the story of how Sammo got his scar that's on his face, which I didn't know, which is really cool. And he also, just like Yoon Byu's in the film, and he'll see Yoon Byu and he'll be like, oh, this one time I went and did a demonstration with Yoon Byu. And it's like, oh yeah, cool. I'm sitting in my laundry room talking to myself. So anyway, there you go. I think that's a pretty good overview of this release as I stammer myself into oblivion at 11 o'clock at night in the laundry room. So what I'm reviewing is Warriors 2. It is part of the Warriors 2 Prodigal Son Wing Chun themed Sammo Hung double feature that was out from Eureka in January of 2022. So you can go get yourself a copy of this right now. I will put a link in the description of the video to where you can go and buy this. Holy hell, this video is long. I apologize for that. As always, I thank you so much for watching. My name is Will. This is Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society, and we will see you next time.